And we are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage poor and free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live on the Worldwide Coalition Media headquarters here at the GoLocal Live Broadcast Center, 90 Way Boston Street, in the heart of the city we love, Providence, Rhode Island. It is a frigid night out here, about 15 degrees. So I would ask you to do two things. Number one, this is the type of night that was designed for comfort food. Again, as always, I can make up a perfect excuse or rationalization. In fact, if you ever need to talk to your significant other about going out for the evening, and despite weather, events, whatever, I'm your intervention king. Call me, and for the price of a cup of coffee, at the coffee exchange, of course, then I'll give you a perfect rationalization why tonight is probably the best night in your life ever to go out. But when you think about the short ribs at pot au feu, or a hot cup of coffee at the coffee exchange, or even later on in the evening, a hot wiener at New York System, there are more better examples of comfort food here in America. And they're right here in Providence, the Naked City. And of course, given the reopening of the landmark, the true icon, the true symbol, if you will, of the great state of Providence, Rhode Island, and Providence Plantation, the Foxy Lady, we are once again the Naked City. So let's get right down into it tonight. Joining us again live, he's a regular contributor now to the Coalition, comes on every month or so, to which we are eternally grateful because it's a Friday night, and he lives in a pretty cool place himself, and he could be out having comfort food with his significant other. Of course, is Eric Boehm. He's with a Reason magazine as a reporter. And he brings to us, every time we come on, I can scroll through a half a dozen shows that he's contributed to, and I can look at a half a dozen articles that he's written this week. And there are several that really, really resonate with us tonight, but one that comes to mind is something that's near and dear to the heart of this show. And of course, we're talking about soda taxes. And we link the article in our promotion of the show. So if you go to facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, you can read the article as well, and there's some great references to some other writing. But anyone who's watched this show ever a number of times, or you can look over my shoulder, you'll know that one of our sponsors here is, of course, Yacht Club Bottling Works, Yacht Club Soda, another icon in the state of Rhode Island, in business for over 100 years. Rhode Island's boutique soda. Before we needed, well, boutique sodas. So when we talk about sugary soda taxes, this is legislation that is literally designed to put icons, great Rhode Island institutions, like Yacht Club Bottling Works, literally out of business. So, Eric, again, first of all, welcome back to the show. Your range of writing in the past week or so is truly the work of Renaissance men, so we continue to be impressed. But what the hell happened in Philadelphia, and why are in the middle of food deserts, and I'll use the liberals' term for that, why in the middle of food deserts is the quote-unquote best thoughts of Philadelphia's leadership literally putting out of business the only supermarket in the hood?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on, Pat. Always good to be here. And this is, it's just one of those, stories of unintended consequences, really, more than anything else. Even though these are consequences that I think most, certainly economists, I think most people who have a basic understanding of how taxes work probably could have predicted, but unintended from the city's perspective, at least. The story that I covered this week has to do with a ShopRite store. I don't know if ShopRite extends all the way up there to Rhode Island. I don't think they do. I think it's a Philadelphia, New Jersey chain primarily. Right. But Jeff Brown is an owner of several ShopRite stores in the Philadelphia area. He says that he is closing one of those locations because of, he says, largely because of the Philadelphia soda tax, which has cost him millions of dollars in revenue. He said he's seen a 23% decline in overall sales. And just to, we should note that we call this the soda tax. Really what it is it's a tax on sugary beverages. The Philadelphia tax applies not just to soda, but to sports drinks, to some juices if they don't contain 100% real fruit juice, anything like that that's sort of artificially sweetened is subject to this tax. So it's it's been a significant tax for people to pay in Philadelphia. It adds about $1 to a 2-liter bottle of soda. It adds about $2, a little more than $2 to a 6-pack of cans. And Jeff Brown, unfortunately, this one ShopRite that he's closing, the location of it is really what's unfortunate here. It happens to be right on the very edge of the city. I mean, just a couple of blocks away from the western suburbs of Philadelphia. And so any of his customers that might have been coming to his shop right there, they can drive, I'm talking literally 5 more minutes down the road. They're across City Line Avenue. They're outside of the city, and they can go to a grocery store there, and they don't have to pay this tax.
Right. Well, and again, when you look at it, and that's why it's such a fascinating comparison to Rhode Island. Rhode Island, I would imagine, sometime I'll have to actually check my facts on this, is probably about the size of Philadelphia. So, again, you have these city-states or cities, we call them town councils gone wild, where operating in some sort of intellectual vacuum, and I'm trying to be kind here, with no regard whatsoever for the facts, or, again, the rules of, well, maybe at this point it's intended consequences, really just no, I wonder sometimes if these folks, and I'm trying to be kind here, are sentient human beings, because if you can buy something for X at point A, and you can buy something for X times 1.25 at point B, where are people going to buy things? It's really that simple. This is the most fundamental level of economics, isn't it?
Yeah, I think this is one of the most basic things that I think libertarians would agree on, and you know as well as I do, maybe better than I do, that libertarians like to disagree about lots of things.
Yeah.
But people respond to economic incentives, right? That's sort of basic bottom line libertarian belief, and I don't think it's just a libertarian belief. I think it's pretty much true about the world that we live in. People respond to economic incentives. If something's cheaper, if they can get the same product, and spend less money on it over here than over there, well, that's where they're going to go, especially if it's not, inconvenient or difficult to do so. So, no, I think you're right about the comparison there. Rhode Island is a little bit bigger than Philadelphia, I think, but, the same sort of geographic principle applies. I was visiting a friend a number of years ago who lived in Cumberland, Rhode Island, and I was just sort of, this was my first time in Rhode Island, and of course I was fascinated by sort of how small the state is and how quickly you get from one side to the other of it. But we were driving around, and we went from the house that we were staying in there in Cumberland over across the border into Massachusetts and back into Rhode Island and then back across the border into Massachusetts. And it was just sort of instantaneous. You don't even notice. There aren't even big signs or anything like that. You just sort of are meandering back and forth across the border just in your daily travels. And so, it's that easy to go. It's that easy to go outside of Philadelphia to buy a 6-pack of soda. It's that easy to get out of the city. It's that easy to get out of Rhode Island to avoid that tax. And that's, again, I think that's a totally predictable consequence of a policy like this. It's just one that, for whatever reason, the elected officials don't always see that.
Right. Now let's talk about the side effects, if you will. And this is one of these situations where the cure is probably worse than the disease. Our progressive friends love to talk almost misty-eyed about food deserts. So maybe if you could define what a food desert is for our eager audience.
Well, food desert, I think, I don't know the actual dictionary definition, but a food desert is an area where it's difficult to, where there aren't sufficient amounts of food stores or food supplies. Mm-hmm. I think that's, I think the really interesting thing about this situation in Philadelphia, though, is that is sort of the city's response to this. Is that so this guy, Jeff Brown, says he's got to close his ShopRite store because he's losing money. Because people aren't buying soda. And the city's response to this is to say, that's ridiculous because we've done studies and the soda tax isn't changing what people buy or where they buy it or how they buy it. And this is true. The city actually did commission a study by Harvard researchers. The city paid for it. And the results say that by and large, people are still making the same purchases they made before the tax. They're just paying more. But the whole point of the tax, right, the whole justification for a tax like this, whether it's on soda or whether it's on cigarettes or whether it's on alcohol, is that it's going to make people buy less of it, right? We tax things that we want people to consume less of because we understand that basic relationship. So it's sort of disingenuous to me for the city to stand there and say, oh, no, he's just making up those numbers. People aren't buying less soda, because if that's the case, then your policy has failed on its face, right? Like on its own principle, the policy has failed. So there's no way for them to make that argument with a straight face. Right,
and there was a site by a significant food market research firm that showed that, in fact, soda You know, thanks to barcoding and scanning major supermarkets, literally numbers roll up on almost a daily basis. For general public consumption, it's usually on a monthly or quarterly basis. But one can, you know, whether it be the restaurant business, the supermarket business, and also in part to support sales tax calculations, we actually really do have a handle on what numbers go for. And, you know, something in states, for example, where there's deposit loss, we know instantly whether or not certain businesses are impacted. And one market firm did cite they were talking in the neighborhood of a 50 or 55% drop in soda sales in given areas. So this, you know, there's willful disbelief by the government who wants to have it both ways. As you mentioned, they are aiming this policy like a gun at, you know, retailers and manufacturers, and yet at the same time saying, no, that's not what we meant. Well, what did you mean? What was your purpose?
Yeah.
I
mean, the city's trying to have it both ways here. You're talking about this study that was done by Catalina, they're a research firm, and I mean that study. I would sort of buy that. I think before I would look at some of these other studies, some of which have been a number of the studies of the Philadelphia soda tax have either been funded by the city or by opponents of big soda, if you will, right? I mean, those types of studies are going to try to find certain solutions. But even when you look at this one that the city funded that Harvard University did, it's also somewhat misleading for the city to argue that the soda tax hasn't affected any sales and point to that study, because actually when you read that study, what it shows is that beverage sales at Philadelphia grocery stores have actually fallen by about 57%, which is right in line with what this market research firm has found. But the Harvard study goes on to say that the stores' bottom lines haven't been affected, because basically what the stores are doing is they're just passing the full cost of that tax onto the consumers. So if the consumer's paying the full amount of the tax, then the store is still, I guess, doing okay, breaking even. But at the end of the day, that means you and me, or people in Philadelphia, are paying more money.
Well, and that's a stunning admission in of itself, because whenever you look at tolling, sin taxes, things like that, when they're positioned, politicians will argue the contrary, that this will be a cost internalized by manufacturer, purveyor of said product, when in fact we all know that corporations, manufacturers don't pay taxes, sin taxes, consumers do. It's again a fundamental of economics. As so often is the case, the byproduct of this story is fascinating as well. This is truly an onion story, because as your article pointed out, who funded the Harvard study?
No, that's right. The city funded that study, and this has just sort of been the ongoing effort by the city of Philadelphia to kind of. I mean, you were just talking about how these taxes are always they're always imposed, and the idea is that it's going to be the big corporations, the big businesses that pay these taxes. The reality is that they get passed along down the supply chain, and at the end of the day, consumers end up paying for most of these things. And that's true whether we're talking about soda taxes or whether we're talking about tariffs, or anything else like that. I mean, it's always going to come down to real people paying those higher costs. But this is something that Philadelphia Mayor Jim Kenney has been trying to do really ever since this tax got passed. There was actually another store. I think this was a sandwich shop, if my memory serves. I don't have this in front of me at the moment, but there was a sandwich shop in Philadelphia that was going out of business as well, or not going to sell sodas anymore, or something like that. And they had hiked prices previous to this, and the mayor had claimed that they were trying to price gouge their consumers as a way to generate opposition to the soda tax. That by passing the tax on, that's somehow price gouging, and that's a way to get people mad about the soda tax. But if I don't know, but I guess if you absorb the cost of that tax and then go out of business because of it, like this grocery store is doing, then the mayor isn't happy about that either. So basically what you have here is you have politicians in Philadelphia that want nothing to change, but they want higher taxes, but they don't want any of the consequences that come with that. And you just can't have that. Like that's not a realistic option.
Well, and one must always remember that there's something unique to mayors in Philadelphia. There's a special place in the Mayor's Hall of Fame for a guy named Wilson Goode, who was the mayor that actually intentionally bombed his own city. So there's a track record here. Folks, Google it. I'm not making that up. I found fascinating the Mayor Bloomberg, in this case in the form of Bloomberg Philanthropies, found his way into this situation, if you will. In Rhode Island, we call it a frittata. Now, one not go back too far in New York City history to remember that the city and a great deal of the country made great sport of Mayor Bloomberg because he was the first one to advance the sugary sweet soda tax. And at the time, essentially that was sort of when Bloomberg was first put in as mayor, he was considered a common sense, middle of the road guy who was a real practical administrator, and his business savvy translated into his now famous city hall reconfiguration where everybody had, including himself, had seats on the floor and on the building. They didn't in a great flourish they took away their offices and supposedly rebuilt the culture in New York City Hall after America's mayor had left, and that was really the beginning of sort of his nanny state phase, if you will. So even he's involved in this now, and of course, he's being mentioned now as the one centrist, independent alternative to the mess that's shaping up for 2020. And yes, we are talking about 2020 here. So, so will soda taxes loom large in a presidential election? You tell me. It seems to be one of Bloomberg's signature issues. He will make the country safe for soda for all of us.
Yeah, I don't think Michael Bloomberg's ever seen a vice tax that he hasn't liked. That's sort of his his go-to scheme when he was mayor of New York. Now he's pushing this in a lot of other places as well. This is I don't know that this will ever rise to the level of something that gets discussed in a presidential campaign, but I mean, who knows, right? It's difficult to predict at this point. I think the underlying issues here, though, are things that certainly should be discussed in presidential campaigns. Questions about the consequences of taxation, questions about whether the government should be involved in nudging people to make certain decisions, with their purchasing, what they buy at the store, based on health or welfare or anything else. That is, I think those are all issues that we really should be having a larger discussion on, but I don't know if that'll happen either in the next campaign.
Well, no, that I'm not sure if the although if you I'll just throw the name out there, if you were to follow the now blooming candidacy of one Kim Ruff as a libertarian alternative to a certain ex-governor, those issues actually could become to the fore if somehow we can make it into the now infamous debates. Now, on a sort of a fun sideline to this same issue, there appears to be, to me, occurring as we speak, the first real tragic, and this is actually heartbreaking, and I know my friends are catatonic over this, but it would appear that the first casualty of the shutdown may not be the SNAP program, may not be the United States Coast Guard, may not to be the TSA, but the first, and this is you can tell this is sort of cathartic for me to even bring this up, but it would appear that the craft beer industry is now under fire because of the government shutdown. What's going on here?
Yeah, this is a good story. One of those sort of knock-on side effects of the government shutdown is that breweries and wineries, distilleries for that matter, anybody who makes alcoholic beverages in the United States, they can't get approval to sell any new products, anything that's not already on the market, because little known fact, before you can sell a new beer, for example, you have to get the labels, the packaging for that beer has to be approved by the United States Treasury Department, by this Bureau of Alcohol and Tobacco Tax and Trade Bureau that's inside the Treasury Department, and they have the final say on all of the sort of packaging and labels that go on alcoholic beverages. So that means that right now they're shut down. They're not approving new applications. They're not taking a look at new products. So there are brewers all over this country who have they've got beer in the tanks. They've got beer fermenting, maybe some new variety of beer that they were planning to push out on the market in the next few months, and they don't know if they're going to be able to do that now because they say they can't get the approvals they need to before they can sell that beer.
Now, as your typical, very very often, by the way, comments and conversations are had about the challenges millennials face in employment and career decisions. I, for one, now find myself with a new purpose in life because I think it clearly is my destiny to go work for the Bureau of Tobacco, Alcohol, Tax, and Trade Bureau, whatever they call themselves now. I want to be the guy who approves beer labels. Who the hell knew there was a guy who? I mean, is there? This article screams for more research. Does he have to actually make judgment on the relative conversation that beer labels generate versus the actual beer? And in this case, should he then be criminally held liable for a Michelob? I mean, how does one become the beer label czar, if you will?
Yeah, these are all good questions. I will take my best shot at answering some of them. I don't know how someone gets into this job. That's a fascinating one. I would love to be that person. I guess I would really just want to fire myself, I think, if I had that job. Yeah. No, I mean there are actually some serious issues that go well beyond the government shutdown with this Alcohol and Tobacco Tax and Trade Bureau. And some of these issues are First Amendment issues. You may remember this was a story that was sort of a little bit viral a few years ago. There was a brewery in Minnesota, Indeed Brewing Company, based in Minneapolis. They make some fantastic beers. I love Indeed Brewing Company. They were making a beer that was made with lavender extract, like from the flower, lavender extract, sunflower oil, and dates. So lavender, sunflower, and dates. They wanted to call this beer LSD Ale. They had a sort of a psychedelic label that they wanted to put on the beer. Obviously, the beer doesn't contain LSD, right? That's good. It's pretty obvious. But they wanted to call it LSD Ale. And the Treasury Department told them, no, you can't do that because it violates some vague statute that they've interpreted over and over again to basically stop breweries from being able to sell any sort of beer that makes even a rather covert reference to drugs, which, okay, fine. But think about the fact that if you were making and this is actually something that somebody wrote a number of years for us at Reason a number of years ago, if you were making perfume and you wanted to call your perfume like Opium, right? If that was the Opium by Pat Ford, that was going to be your next big, perfume brand. You'd be totally legal. You could do that. Like, no government agent is going to come and stop you. People may not buy it, but I mean, nobody's going to come and stop you from putting that label on it. Coke is a major soda company, right? Like, people buy Coke every day in this country, and there's no government agents telling Coca-Cola that they can't advertise their product by calling it Coke. But when you make beer, you can't, make any sort of reference to drugs in the name of your beer, or else the Treasury Department will stop you. So it just doesn't make any sense. And really, this is a sort of this agency doesn't make any sense even when the government is running. It causes problems, and now that the government shut down, it's just causing different problems.
By the way, for the record, there is a friend of mine, good friend of mine, a fellow lover of liberty, who drives rideshare, and I can't say who he is because it's clearly actionable. He has decided to rename his Uber experience. He renamed it Duber because he is tolerant, if you will, of in-flight transportation on a number of different levels. We'll just leave it at that. If Uber were to find out, I'm sure they wouldn't be excited. So the shutdown is now starting to reach out into American culture. No one really cares this week whether or not the TSA has floppy ears or not. They're more obsessed with whether or not most of the I'm not sensing with TSA employees a lot of brand loyalty there. Quite frankly, the last person out turn off the lights. Doesn't look like they're willing to stick around and engage with us in the unique manner with which they often engage with us for nothing. So, essentially the world's going to hell in a handbasket. It's this is why we go to Reason.com, by the way. We get to the real heart of the issues. Now, in another article that you were talking about, and this actually is fascinating because a number of Libertarian Party organizations around the country have essentially, I believe, don't hold me accountable if I'm wrong here, I believe it was Michigan may have been the first, have decided to engage in these private cleanup parties where, and I know it happened in D.C. to much effect. They actually went out to that strip of land in between all the monuments, the public mall, if you will, and engage in voluntary cleanups. Do you sense that the nation is ready to step in and perform the acts critical or non-critical of the federal government in case the shutdown continues?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to be, and I think these sorts of volunteer efforts are great, and it's wonderful to see people. It's great to see libertarians stepping up and cleaning up parks and showing that sort of volunteer effort can work. I wrote a piece this week about some of this, and also looking at some of the private businesses that are helping to keep Yellowstone National Park open. And I think it's really heartening to see. Again, to see those volunteer efforts, but I think it's really heartening to see the private businesses that are chipping in, in Yellowstone Park, because they're doing it not out of any sense of altruism or trying to make a political point, but they're doing it because it affects their bottom lines, right? They want tourists to continue to come to Yellowstone, even though the park is closed. They want the roads plowed. They want the snowmobile trails groomed, the things that the National Park Service usually does. That these private businesses are doing it. And I think that makes a pretty salient point about the ways in which national parks could operate in a larger way in the private sector, in the way in which, if we're not going to go full privatization of the national parks, a way in which you could at least start to see how that privatization might take place. It wouldn't be, as I think liberals like to portray it sometimes, it wouldn't be, selling off national parks to the highest bidder so we can stick gas and oil wells in them. It would be allowing private businesses that, are run by people who care very deeply about the environment and who want to share that love of the environment and of our national parks with other people, and they want to make money doing it. It's going to be those types of businesses and those types of people that are ultimately in charge of things, and they're handling things pretty well in Yellowstone at the moment. So that's, I think that's a really positive outcome of this. I think just on the shutdown in general, I think it's tempting. And George Will wrote a piece today saying I'm sorry, not George Will. This was David Brooks, I think it was, who wrote a piece today saying that this is a libertarian dream to have this government shutdown, because it means we've got federal bureaucrats who are out of work and not getting paid. And I think it's tempting to look at it that way and to be, to point and laugh at the TSA agents who are calling out sick. But I think it's also important to remember that this is not the way in which we should want to see the government, rolled back, the way in which we should want to see limited government come to be. Excuse me, certainly not in pursuit of a cause that is really just, excessive additional spending on something like the border wall, and not, at the drop of a hat like this. This is something that you would want to see play out in a way that would allow for agencies and allow for individuals to, to prepare for this to happen. So that's something that you could do, and I think the roadmap is all there for how you could do this with the national parks. Whether it happens or not, I guess, is still somewhat of an open question, but, that's life in the swamp for you.
There you go. Well, and I guess the closing thought is, is the opportunity there, once given the demonstrated proof that, well, if government isn't there in certain forms, that organic private market solutions pop up, is one of the positive side effects of this shutdown going to be the notion that maybe the control that government has over all these everyday aspects of our lives is not impenetrable. And in fact, something as simple as the giving model, which has popped up on the internet as a solution, where, say shoe manufacturers donate a shoe for every shoe they sell, is that alliance with something like the National Park System going to all of a sudden take hold? And when government is allowed to retrench, will they allow it to take hold? And that, to me, is the million-dollar question. Will government...
I think the interesting thing, one of the interesting things, just real quick, about the national park part of this is that, when you have that vacuum, there's obviously, supply and demand exists there, right? There's these markets that are already built up in and around the national parks to serve the tourists that are coming there. So it's not as if, the market is completely shut out. It's just sort of maybe relegated to the fringe a bit. But the National Park Service itself says that during 2017, there were an estimated $18.2 billion contributed to local economies in and around national parks. So when suddenly the government services there disappear and there's a bit of a vacuum, there's a strong economic incentive for all those businesses that are existing already and surviving and thriving in and around the national parks to step in and fill that void. And I think that's the type of thing you look for when you look at how can we roll back government in other places, how can we find opportunities to get government out of places where maybe it shouldn't be in the first place. hey, where are there already private sector services that are already kind of competing with or working alongside of government agencies? And could those private sector services, could those private businesses do more? And would they voluntarily do more if the government wasn't there? And that's the places to start looking.
Absolutely, and it's a great point to close on. I know that you've got a commitment that you've got to take care of right now. Eric Bam, he of course is a reporter with Reason.com and Reason Magazine. Take a look tonight, bookmark it, make it your homepage. Original thought, original great accessible writing on issues, and of course, as I always like to say, answering questions we didn't even know we needed to ask. Eric, thank you so very, very much, and hopefully we'll have you on again in a couple of weeks.
Thanks so much, Pat. Always a good time. Cheers.
Have a wonderful night. There you go. So, what is going to be the true impact of this shutdown? Is there an opportunity here in the dearth and the abstinence, if you will, of government services and the abdication, temporary as it might be, for government services to be replaced by far more efficient, cost-effective, non-doctrinaire, and non-enforceable government monopolies on these services? That's sort of the dream, isn't it? Where private industry, private markets step up and fill a void that government is unable to fill because of, in this case, a mandated shutdown, a budgetary issue. In other cases, incompetence, institutional stupidity. It happens everywhere. We pay way too much money for far too many levels of government for this to continue. And yet at the same time, the goods and services delivered by government, either on a local level, say here in Providence, at the state level in Rhode Island, or on the federal level, the quality of the delivery of goods and services to the taxpayer continue to be poor. Now, education, of course, is the perfect example of that. And one has to wonder now, given the abject failure of our educational system in the state, as was so aptly proven by the MCAS tests. Yes, I'll say it was proven. No more excuses. A state government just to the north of us, which is roundly applauded as having the best school systems, do a lot better in these tests. One has to wonder if, in fact, there will be a new surge of support services, alternative classrooms, alternative curriculum, in the wake of what is now a confirmed fact here in the state of Rhode Island. You always have to wonder why it takes a tragedy, if you will, and I consider what happened to be in Rhode Island a tragedy, or perhaps even a comical side effect of a self-described tragedy in the form of the government shutdown. No, I'm not about to have a collective nervous breakdown because the federal government finds itself without money to provide services that I never use and that are hopelessly overpriced and hopelessly under-delivered. But why it always has to take that type of, I don't know, groundswell, that type of earthquake, if you will, in order to move us towards that? I don't know. I do know this past weekend, one of our state legislators decided that she, as a teacher, was uniquely qualified to speak with some degree of exclusivity on all matters educational. The only thing I'd like to say on that is to follow up with the tweets that we issued here at the Coalition. If, in fact, we are to continue to rely on the very people who have brought us to this point, where our educational system has abdicated a responsibility now for generations and left us with a failure of historical proportions in our schools. If, in fact, this type of, I'm trying to be kind here, this sort of stunning act, this stunning moment where the said teacher, despite all of the failure that she's faced with, as a sitting legislator, despite all of the failure that's been a result of state legislation in the area of education, there must exist in this state some level of cultural arrogance that is astonishing. Today, former candidate for lieutenant governor, was appointed to some type of advisory job in the city of Providence. Seemingly, it's critically important. I have yet to find out what the salary he's being compensated for. I'd love to think, of course, that he volunteered. The V word, the dreaded V word. I don't simply know, and I will find out. And we'll put a blog post up on the coalition. But, again, more of the same. These are the administrations and arms of government that are looking for 10 more years of your family's life to redefine how they deliver education services to the populace under the guise of the fairness and the morality of having public education. What I found amusing about the young man's appointment was it's critical in nature. It somehow conveniently begins now and ends when he's about to go to law school, regardless of whether or not he's solved the world problems or not. How lucky we are to have people like this who will give of themselves so freely and allow us to highly compensate them so they have someplace to park in between law school and having served in state office. How lucky we are. And yes, that was sarcastic. So, this same administration, in this case the Lord's administration, is hell-bent to provide, and we already have the catchwords, just like common sense gun reform. That was the cliche for last year. Now, the rush is on for universal pre-kindergarten. Now, we in the public are given no information about what the curriculum will be, whose system we're modeling it after, if in fact we are, or are we simply inventing our own approach to pre-K. There's little or no discussion about the cost. There's little or no discussion about who will run it and administer it. The implication being it's the same fine folks who have listened, I mean, for the most part, educationally bankrupted 3 generations now, are going to be in charge of it. That's the important point. And our failure in education lies not only from the inability to execute basic curriculums, to have any sort of true business plan as how the schools are going to be run. It's also the near death grip-like obsession that our school systems have with portraying a movement as opposed to an effective educational response. And the same can be said of free junior college. The same thing can be said of universal pre-K. We will have it. We just don't seem to care what it really means. We will have this wonderful thing that we will spend enormous amounts of money on with no guarantees of success, no discussed plan going into it. We just simply will have it. And that should be good enough. Well, it isn't. At this point in time, if you're a parent, regardless of the financial circumstances you may find yourself in, I would suggest that you abandon public education in this state. If there's any alternatives out there whatsoever that are palatable to you, and I understand private school is very, very expensive, particularly on top of the confiscatory taxes you pay in this state. I understand that. But if there's a way, by hook or by crook, that you can get away with avoiding the public school system in the state, for the good of your children, you must at least try. As they appear to be in collapse throughout the state. The specter, excuse me, of one city council issuing press releases because somehow they had eclipsed the 50% competency rate. Failing, of course, to point out that nearly 50% of the students in their school system hadn't achieved basic levels of performance. That's the canary in the coal mine. That tells you everything you need to know about the mindset of folks supporting public education. They're far more interested in maintaining a system which accrues value to the consulting culture, which accrues value to the professional administrators, which accrues value to, well, middle level and high level management. To them, a public school system is nothing more, nothing less than a necessary excuse in order to engender some type of, for lack of a better term, industrial education industry. That's what we've been saddled with here in the state. What we hope to do over the coming weeks, we hope to get, we're going to reach out to folks that we've had on last year, talk about dyslexia. There are a number of folks who are writing great blogs in the state covering education, everything from IEPs to curriculum, with a laser-like focus that major media seems incapable or unwilling to do. And yes, these people may not be teachers, but clearly they have, as I said, the skills to pay the bills. So we're hoping to reach out to them. So at least we can engender some type of conversation here in the state about what it's going to really take to educate children, not what it's going to really take to continue to maintain a bureaucracy whose sole mission seems truly to be self-sufficiency and developing bigger and bigger bureaucracies, as opposed to actually just performing a bottom line delivery of educational services to our young people. We're going to take a couple-minute break. Joining us at the top of the hour is Stephen Brown from the American Civil Liberties Union. We've had some more developments this week about some of the fiascos perpetrated by Rhode Island government, and particularly in the case of the Attorney General's office, on essentially your right to have access to public records. The ACLU delivered, I think, a stunning message to people in the media business everywhere today when they pointed out that one of the final gifts left to us, ostensibly by the Kilmartin administration, was the interpretation of some bizarre bureaucratic laws to effectively put a lockdown on all levels of public records. Now, we've seen this on significant issues. We've seen people of goodwill, like Patricia Morgan, fight this tooth and nail, at times literally with their own money. And one would have thought, after all the Sturm and Drang relative to the 38 Studios controversy, to attempting to obtain information about the Pawtucket Red Sox, hiring issues, the Lally hiring, you name it. You would have thought at some point that the Attorney General's office would have retreated somewhat from their outrageous efforts to prevent us from access to the most basic information about how our government flows. Well, it's clear that in government today, there is no shame. And government, when put into place through election, appointment, or self-appointment, is willing to interpret any one of those actions as a mandate to move forward like the proverbial bulls in the china shop to accomplish, well, whatever they want. We've seen remarkable erosions of privacy in the last few years. First of all, the establishment of a prescription medical database. Then, legislation which allows for warrantless searches of the prescription medical database. And on and on and on and on. At the same time, using the bureaucracy to prevent access to information which would give context to some of the astonishing institutional failures that this state has endured over the last few years. A perfect example of that, of course, is UHIP. We need not know anything about that. We just need to know that we need to move on. As if the government will let us. So we have a government in Rhode Island that is mired in failure, cloaked by secrecy, and a government that is willing to use whatever parliamentarian trick whatever they can to even extend that. All the while giving themselves a big hearty pat on the back for being, in their words, transparent. So what's up is down and down is up. This is, as Seinfeld put it, bizarro world right here in Rhode Island. So at 7 o'clock at the top of the hour, we're going to engage with Stephen Brown for a little bit. He's going to talk about some of the issues this week. Sometime in and around the 8 o'clock hour, Johnny Rockets, one of the great libertarian podcasters, is going to come in and talk about messaging in the 2020 presidential campaign. He, of course, tied to Ruff Phillips in 2020. So we're going to take a quick break, just a couple minutes off. Stay tuned. We are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live on the Worldwide Coalition Network, here at the GoLocal Live Broadcast Center, in the heart of the city we love, 90 Way Bosses Street. Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio. On the mighty, mighty Twitter at Coalition_Radio, and the mothership, coalitionradio.us. Please, if you hear this podcast or see this video or hear us in the coming weeks, take a moment, if you could, to like us on Facebook, to follow us on Twitter. Take a look at our website. At the same time, I'd be remiss if I didn't give a shout out to our sponsors. We paid homage to them with our opening guest. Of course, I'm talking about Yacht Club Bottling Works, Rhode Island's boutique soda. Before we even knew, well, we had boutique sodas. Pure cane sugar, crystal clear water, as importantly, natural flavors, real ginger. I mean, imagine that. You know, it's wintertime, we're into the playoffs, we're approaching the Super Bowl. Not sure if the Pats are going to make it or not this year. But we got a game coming up Sunday. Stop by the bottling center in Centerdale. You're going to put together a killer meal, or a killer lunch, or killer snacks. We all love snacks for the game on Sunday. So don't use the refinery soda. Don't use the plastic jug chemicals. YachtClubBottlingWorks.com. Air Products. Well, Air Sciences. We're into the winter season now. We're into flu season. AirSciences.net. Daryl Gould and his hardy crew. Mold remediation, biohazards, really fundamental cleanups. The type of cleanup that you can't do with a mop and a bucket. If you've got a daycare center, family living in close confines, someone who may be suffering from an autoimmune disease. You may be in an educational environment. You may have a small office. AirSciences.net. Come by, take an evaluation, provide you with a very simple, straightforward quotation on the services that are available. Keep your family, your loved ones, your children, your coworkers, keep them safe and healthy this holiday season. Flu season is upon us. It's your choice, obviously, whether or not you want to get the latest flu vaccine. But there's other steps you can take beyond the oft-quoted wash your hands, and taking a flu shot. AirSciences.net can help you with that. And of course, Beacon Shipping and Logistics, 1-855-3-SHIP-IT, beaconshippingandlogistics.com. Imagine if you had a company capable of delivering automobiles, trucks, vehicle-related products around the globe that dealt with manufacturers, that dealt with custom upfitters, that dealt with dealerships. And they were based right here in Little Rhodey. beaconshippingandlogistics.com. Our snowbirds are probably already down there, but you're already starting, because you miss Rhodey, you're already starting to plan your comeback. Give them a shout out, 1-855-3-SHIP-IT. So, we're going to take about a 5 or 6 minute break. Folks, stay tuned. We'll be right back. And we are back. We are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live on the Worldwide Coalition Network here at the GoLocal Live Broadcast Center in the heart of the city we love. The Naked City, the city of 1,000 stories, Providence, Rhode Island. Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio. On the mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio. And of course the mothership, CoalitionRadio.us. Anyone who's watched the show for a long time knows our affinity, our respect, and our support for the American Civil Liberties Union. Whether it be here in Rhode Island under the expert guidance of Executive Director Stephen Brown, or nationally as they address all the third rail issues, the uncomfortable issues in civil rights here in America. Ned Hentoff once opined something to the effect of, well, if you aren't upsetting, and I'll use cleaner words, everybody at some time or another, you're probably not doing your job. And no one exemplifies that more than the ACLU. Over the last few months, we've seen them work tirelessly on behalf of free speech issues surrounding the closing of the Foxy Lady. We've worked tirelessly on behalf of a variety of interests surrounding the UHIP crisis. And of course, when it comes to free speech, Fourth Amendment protections, they are literally the poster child for advocating on behalf of sometimes a confused, sometimes an unwilling, sometimes a non-caring, sadly enough, public. It would have been very easy to simply sidestep the issues surrounding the Foxy Lady's closing. That wouldn't have been Mr. Brown and the ACLU. It would be very easy earlier this year and last year to simply dismiss the warrantless searches of the prescription medical database as well. And what's the oldest cliche? If you're not doing anything wrong, you simply have nothing to worry about. We've gone, and this is the opinion of the host, not the guest, through a very difficult period in the last 8 years with regard to the administration of our Attorney General's office. Access to public records is critical in shining light on literally every aspect of government. Our inability to do so, whether be blocked by the big move or sometimes simple, seemingly effortless, behind-the-scenes administration of bureaucracy, is perhaps one of the most dangerous threats to good government as we know it. And let me tell you, that type of stuff is alive and well here in Providence. Joining me tonight for probably about the 50th time is Stephen Brown. He's the Executive Director of the American Civil Liberties Union here in Rhode Island. Stephen, thanks for coming in on short notice on a Friday night. Compelling reading, what you folks put out. We put a link to it on our site. What happened here? And why do we have to worry about the dissemination, if you will, of an Attorney General's office pin? And why does that have dire consequences for us as free people in the state of Rhode Island?
Well, that's a very good question. I think it's important to know the background of this. This all arises in the context of former House Minority Leader Patricia Morgan's attempt to obtain records relating to the Attorney General's expenditure of so-called Google settlement money.
Right.
And in response to that request, she received lots and lots of documents. Among them was a completely redacted two-page document that was redacted other than for the heading, which mentioned a heading, a memo from the Attorney General's Office to the Department of Administration with a title like Purchase of Lapel Pins for the Attorney General's Office. And she couldn't quite understand why she would get a memo like that redacted. We couldn't understand it. And the Attorney General's Office has explained in a recent court filing why they thought they were entitled to provide this document in a redacted form. And what they said was there's an exemption in the Open Records Law, and I'm not quoting it precisely, but it's something to the effect of exempt from the law are preliminary notes, drafts, working papers, memoranda, etc. And And we, and I think just about everybody who deals with open records, had always interpreted that exemption to focus on the word preliminary. Drafts, notes, working papers, all those are by nature sort of preliminary. But what the Attorney General did was he focused on the word memoranda, and he said the exemption bans or allows us to keep confidential anything that's considered a memorandum. Doesn't have to be preliminary. If it's labeled a memorandum, if it looks like a memorandum, it is exempt under the law. And quite frankly, we were shocked. We'd never heard an argument like that before. And if you accept it, you're accepting the idea that literally tens of thousands of documents that state and municipal agencies in the state routinely put together and submit and send to others are off limits under the open records law. All you have to do is label something a memorandum, and it's confidential. And as I said, we were really shocked, and I'm still shocked at it. And we think something needs to be done about it. Whether it ends up being a court challenge, whether the legislature steps in and amends the statute to clarify what I think everybody thought it meant. Something really needs to be done, because otherwise every government agency now has at their disposal an incredible argument for withholding lots of very important public records.
Now, this was created in the prior Attorney General's administration, correct?
Yes, the memo was withheld in sometime before October. We filed a brief raising concerns about it, and then we also filed an open records request ourselves with the Attorney General. And again, sort of surprisingly, we actually got an unredacted copy of the memo ourselves from the Attorney General. So we, when Representative Morgan went back into court seeking to challenge the judge's original decision upholding the Attorney General's redaction of that document and lots of other documents, she argued, and we also filed a short brief arguing with her, that the Attorney General's providing of the unredacted memo to us demonstrated that they really had no basis for withholding it in the first place.
Right.
But what happened was last week, with the new Attorney General in office, they filed a response to our memo and Representative Morgan's, and they said, no, the fact that we gave it to the ACLU doesn't change our position that this is confidential under the open records law. We just exercised our discretion to give it to the ACLU because we have the authority to disclose even confidential records if we want to. So essentially, this new administration has reconfirmed this position that was made a few months ago, that the open records law allows government agencies, including the Attorney General's office, to keep secret any document that's labeled a memorandum, and at the same time, if they want to, they can also disclose it, but they don't have to.
One of the things I've always worked very hard, Stephen, in my on-air conversations with you, is to remain apolitical. I think that's important because that's how your organization operates. You look at the law, you look at court cases, settled law, legislation, and by doing so, you remain above the fray of conventional partisan politics. So I'll say this, and this is given the hopes folks like me who are knee-deep in the muck of partisan politics had for the current administration, incoming, if you will, now arrived, I'll just say that's crushingly disappointing. Because I think a lot of us, and again, I'm keeping the ACLU out of this, a lot of us had seen sort of the new administration as sort of the Lone Ranger showing up on the skyline, out there in the mountains with his, ready to take on, for the forces of good. And I mean, the question is, and I want to put this in context two different ways. I'm sure you talk to other chapters of the ACLU. The beauty of this is it's a national organization with semi-independent chapters locally. Do we have one of the more Byzantine ARPA laws in the nation? Or am I just imagining things?
I mean, we certainly don't have a good one. I mean, there are lots, to be fair, there are lots of other states, other state ACLUs that have lots of open records fights themselves. So I wouldn't want to say, we have the worst one in the country, but it is pretty bad. And one of the reasons that I say that we often have so many problems with our open records law and more generally getting documents from government agencies here is that Rhode Island was the 49th state in the country to pass an open records law.
Wow.
We beat out Mississippi. Our law was adopted in the late 1970s, I think 1978 or 1979. And so I think we're still, you have people who may be clerks or, other custodians of documents who are actually around when there wasn't any right to records whatsoever.
Right.
So I think there's a culture, there's a culture that still exists that hasn't been removed about this whole notion of the public having a right to access to records. I think we're still evolving.
Right.
And sometimes I think that has something to do with so many of the problems we see. There just isn't yet an appreciation that as a matter of basic government policy, records should be open.
Right. And one only need look to 38 Studios and the quote-unquote, air-quote, investigation surrounding it and the bitterness that still exists in the public. Less and less so because of the events, more and more so because of the lack of any clarity to see how that can really poison the well for an entire generation and how they react to government initiatives, how they work with government. It's just an open wound that keeps being rubbed raw by seeming, tone deaf isn't even the word for it at this point with the prior administration. And, as I spoke in the opening, some of the things that occurred particularly in the last 2 or 3 years when, typically a term-limited attorney general's office would go at least somewhat quiet. It almost seemed like there was a rush at the end to to lay as many bombs as they could. Can you think of any, and I don't want to put you on the spot here, but can you think of any practical reasons why this came out at the last minute? Was this just an attempt to shut down any investigation into the Google money?
No, I don't. I mean, Representative Morgan did get literally thousands of pages of documents. Some of them were, in our view, clearly inappropriately redacted. The lapel pin memo is just one example of that. So, I don't want to say they withheld all sorts of things. They gave her lots of things, but what this particular dispute, I think, does demonstrate is something we've seen time and again, which is, even though the Attorney General's office is supposed to be the enforcer of APRA, the open records law, all too often they just seem to go out of their way to find reasons not to disclose records. And, it's wrong in and of itself. It's wrong when you consider that they should be the biggest proponents of the open records law as its enforcement agent. But we've seen this on many occasions. Open government groups have complained for years about all sorts of attorney general opinions that we believe undermine the law rather than help promote it.
Right. Has the, I know on a number of other issues surrounding open records, there is a cadre of organizations that have weighed in support of your organization. For example, the Rhode Island Press Association, have they weighed in on this yet, or is it just sort of the shock just sort of setting in?
Yeah, not yet. We have, this week we have made other groups like the Press Association and Access Rhode Island, which is the Open Government Coalition, of a number of organizations like the Press Association. We made them aware of it, and we'll be figuring out next steps. We haven't determined ourselves what the next step should be, but we did think it was important that not only the public but members of the media learn about this position of the Attorney General's office, because it's going to directly affect them. Anybody who makes use of the open records law on a regular basis, like the news media, will probably very soon be on the receiving end of something similar to what Representative Morgan received, and they ought to know that's out there, that they should be prepared for that to potentially happen.
Yeah, we're on your mailing list, which we appreciate, and again, we pointed directly to this, and we'll continue to point directly to ACLU press releases and white papers, if you will. What was different from most of the things that I received for you guys, which are advisory in nature, and I'm an indie media guy, so yeah, rhetoric and hyperbole are kind of our coin of the realm here, but the chilling tone of the missive you sent out. Normally, you've got a white paper, some really great developed information as an attachment, and then you just send out an advisory letter. But I would have likened this. I remember reading the weather report, one of the last weather reports in the run up to Katrina, which was quite compelling. It said that loss of life will occur. Significant destruction is, and that and again, I'm a little hyperbolic here, but I mean that same type of feeling as I read that this afternoon and said, oh my God, because when we often take for granted, because of the constant drumbeat of scandal in this state, it's easy to take for granted the efforts of Tim White or Jim Hummel. The kind of work that goes on beyond the scenes, I've only gotten a snapshot of, but APRA is really a primary tool. This stuff doesn't. You can't Google this stuff. It's not.
Yep.
You need to have the consent, if you will, and a working relationship with the very government agencies that you are there as the fourth estate to cover and investigate in order to really get anywhere. This just draws down a wall, doesn't it?
It does. I mean, the reason we wanted to make the media aware of this, as I said, is because this is something that will affect them, and it could affect them in a very significant way. I'm trying to think of all the documents we've received over the years under open records laws that would constitute memoranda. I never would have imagined in a million years that somebody would interpret the open records statute to allow for for keeping documents like that secret. And because it could have such a huge effect, we really did want to send a warning out to people to make them aware of it, because as I said, the open records law has been around for a long time. I have never heard anybody make the argument that the Attorney General's office has made in this case, interpreting this exemption for preliminary types of documents. Never. So by taking that position, the Attorney General is sending a message to every other government agency. We did this. We decided we could withhold this memo. You have the right to do that too.
And the self-fulfilling prophecy here is that particularly in the areas where administration officials are politically appointed, I should say. I think it's at this point in time, is everyone, I'm trying to be facetious here, but is everyone downloading Microsoft Word's different templates for the word memorandum? I mean, are we going to see memorandum be the new word for 2019 here in Rhode Island? It just stands to reason that that's how they'll get that. And anyone who's done an APRA understands that literally, you almost know you're onto something when the town solicitor literally waits. There's times when I've requested things, even here in the coalition, a little indie media outlet, where I've requested things where it's almost like the town solicitor is there with a watch, gazing at the time, gazing at when exactly the last minute he or she can release it, and does so. And I don't know what they think is or isn't going to happen. My big takeaway from this, and again, this is all very new. I mean, this is hit me today, thanks to your good work. We had a similar moment, if you will, years ago under a certain state senator that we all refer to as the Little General, where essentially the powers of the Ethics Commission were rendered null and void because of a similar sort of twisted interpretation, in this case, in court. What it spawned was a multi-year, almost multi-generational effort to reform ethics legislation and the powers, if you will, of the Ethics Commission in this state. Has the time come for the same type of effort, the same type of coalition to be formed to address this issue? Because this is sort of the culmination of the steady drip, drip, drip that's happened over the last few years with regard to access to public records. Have we reached that point now where we have to significantly revise the legislation? And and is the spirit out there to do that?
Well, the Access Rhode Island Coalition, which consists of a number of groups, ACLU, League of Women Voters, Press Association, Common Cause. We've been fighting this battle for years and years, and also for years we've put in legislation in an attempt to adopt some comprehensive reforms to the open records law. So there is an ongoing effort to do that. I think one of the most frustrating things, though, is we can come up with a bill as we have and had it introduced and push for it, but you can put in a bill like that addresses a whole range of issues, which it does, and not be prepared for the next incredible decision that comes out of the Attorney General's office interpreting the law in some strange way. So, the General Assembly last year could have said, this is the year for open records. We're going to pass this comprehensive bill that the Access Rhode Island Coalition has provided us, and that would be great. And then here we are now, and the Attorney General's office is saying, all those amendments were great; they're now law. But here's something you didn't fix because we can withhold this record because it's a memorandum. We can't predict. If you have an agency that wants to find ways to undermine the statute, come up with these very strange interpretations or strained interpretations of the open records law, it's going to be a never-ending battle. I think what you really need are government officials who make a very clear point of saying, as Attorney General Noronha had prior to his installation in office, he had said on a few occasions publicly that his position was, when in doubt, turn it over. That the presumption should be openness, not secrecy, and I think that's what you need. But this is what we've seen. The first week in his office, this is what happened. And so, unless there's a very clear message sent by those in power with the authority to interpret and implement the open records law, reform of the statute itself can only go so far. I think it's an important reform of the statute is really important, but it's not going to solve everything if you have agencies that are not interested in vigorous enforcement of the law.
It's just stunning. It really is. And how many conversations have you and I had in the last 2 years where it just, there's an old game show from the 50s, folks. It was, can you top this? Which seems to be routinely played here in Rhode Island government. And as the saying would be at the end of any game show back in the day, it would be, there are always parting gifts, and everyone seems to go home a loser here in Rhode Island. I just, again, without trying to wax politically, this is really stunning. because I don't think anyone on the political side of the equation anticipated this type of rapid relapse, if you will, into what many of us had considered was the end of the dark ages here and civil liberties here in Rhode Island. And the challenge too is, and this is something you've spent a career fighting. How do you, whether it be the prescription medical database and the warrantless searches of it, or in this case, open records, how do you excite a populace, a voting public that is so beaten down in so many ways and is so, unaware, I don't want to use a pejorative here, let's just say unaware of the ramifications of attacks on their civil liberties. What can we do here in Rhode Island to get people mad?
Well, I think you're in a better position. I mean, I think that's the role of the media. It can be very helpful in that regard, to make people aware of what's going on, to encourage them to get involved. That's certainly a key first step. So, just by talking about the issues is something that is an essential initial step to any sort of reform.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and again, I always kind of go on and on with the praise here, but your organization's willingness to work in lockstep, even with the smallest members of the independent media crowd in this state, is something to be admired, because it's you folks have a long week. Your willingness to reach out and literally sometimes appear at the opening of an envelope. Boy, when so you anticipate then that reform legislation is going to be presented again. What do you anticipate the timing on that? And I guess we're all trying to sort out the tea leaves with new members of the House, the re-election, if you will, of Speaker Mattiello. We're all trying to sort out what impact this is going to have on everyone's pet issues. Too early to tell for that, but do you anticipate a time when this legislation will be reintroduced? And is there a sponsor that we can look to yet, or is that still in the reformulation phase?
It's still too early, but sometime in the next month, I expect that it would be reintroduced, and I'd be happy to let you know about it. Yeah,
and that's something. I mean, I call cheers Thursday nights at Senate Judiciary. It's quite a little crowd that shows up every week to torture them up there. I guess here we go again. Here we go again.
I'm afraid I've got to go now, though.
Okay.
So
no, we listen. We appreciate it. Stephen Brown, the American Civil Liberties Union. This is an issue that we will stay on top of. And again, thank you for joining us again on probably one of the few nights you have off.
Quite all right. Thank you, Pat.
All right, buddy.
Take care.
All right, so we're going to take a quick break now again. We've got a lot of half-hour guests and 20-minute spots. But coming in at 8 o'clock is a 1-hour homage to podcasting in the libertarian circle, if you will. So I'm going to take a quick 5-minute break, and then we're going to come back on. We are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live on the Worldwide Coalition Network here at the GoLocal Live Broadcast Center, here in the heart of the city we love, Providence, Rhode Island. Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, on the mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio, and of course the mothership at coalitionradio.us. If there's a moment, if you have a moment, if you could like or follow one of our pages, we would be very grateful. It's difficult and a challenge for independent media to work its way through all the noise, and simply using the algorithms of our favorite social media packages is one way to do that. So if you would like us, and there's a link also on our homepage to our YouTube page, where these and all other shows will live in perpetuity. So we're going to take a few minutes, and we'll be right back. And we are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live on the worldwide Coalition Media Network here at the GoLocal Proud Broadcast Center in the heart of the city we love, a chilly 15-degree Providence, Rhode Island. Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio. On the mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio. And of course, the mothership, CoalitionRadio.us. Joining me tonight, after a little break in the action, here is, I'm proud to say, I've got rock and roll indie media royalty here. He, of course, is Johnny Rocket of the Launchpad with Raylene Lightheart. He's joining me alone tonight from his 63-degree bunker deep in the foothills of Arizona. Johnny, welcome to the Coalition for the very first time.
Yeah, Pat, thank you so much for having me, man. It's an honor. It's really cool. It's cool to hear it from you. And I've heard all of my good friends on your show, so I figured, hey, this is great. Now I'm part of it. This is awesome.
Well, we're all part of a bigger effort, and I'll just lay it on the table. Now through literally some point in early November, we're going to be spending time on the upcoming 2020 election, specifically with the Ruff Phillips 2020 campaign, talking about issues, some personalities, a little bit of getting to know you over the last few weeks, but driving right to the heart of the Libertarian Nation as we run up to the National Convention in Austin is issues. Because ultimately, the future of the Libertarian Party, its strength, its heart, is our philosophy and how we use our philosophy every day to work with the issues confronting both the United States and the world at large. So, but like I said, I want to spend a little time kind of getting to know you. These are folks that I've had the pleasure of meeting on and off, and we're from all over the country, on and off over the last few years as part of the Libertarian universe. But it's great to work with them on a I'll call it a professional level. At least you're a professional. So give us a little bit of background about your podcast. You know, I loosely describe it as rock and roll meets liberty. Give us a rundown of your efforts.
Oh, yeah, that's a great analogy there. Rock and roll meets liberty. So I started this. I was in a band for forever, probably about 10 years, in a rockabilly band in Washington State. And I figured, I really liked the ideas of libertarianism. And I thought, well, it would be great if I actually, I was in an apartment one time, and my roommate heard me complaining about something. He's like, what you need to do is do a podcast. So I said, that's a great idea. So I started doing it about 5 years ago. And I figured, well, I could take some of my musical influence and make liberty cool. I think that's one of the things. I saw a lot of libertarian media out there, but it was very stale and very informative. It was great stuff, great content, but I don't know if it had the oomph and the cool factor to sell it. I think that's what libertarians are lacking in this modern day. I think there's been a lot as of recently, but when I got into the movement, quote unquote movement, that at that time I think there was a shortage of cool factor in liberty.
Right.
And I mean, it was a lot of stuffed shirts. There's a lot of guys talking about economics, and I love that stuff. That's great, informative things, and there's nothing wrong with it. I give credit to those people where credit is due, and the knowledge that they need to have, and the economists and the philosophers. That's beautiful. But we need people out there on the ground floor in the media movement making liberty cool, and I think that's what I'm trying to do. And yes, I'm not saying I'm definitely the it factor or the number, the cool cat on the block, but I'm definitely cooler than a lot of people. So I'm going to keep it there and move on and keep pushing liberty and keep making it fun and palatable and enjoyable and, getting that message out there one way or another.
Right.
Through media.
As our shared friend Tony Jones would say, you and he in particular truly scare the squares. It's
I got a lot of tattoos too. That scares people, and they're like, "Whoa, what do you get? Did that hurt?" I'm like, "No, it didn't hurt."
Yeah, but I mean, your approach is living proof to the notion that liberty lies in independence, liberty lies in self-ownership, liberty lies in really taking a lifestyle that you ascribe to, living it to its fullest, and at the same time raising other people up alongside with you. That's really what libertarianism is all about. Taking a fundamental approach organically that we can improve all of our lives through the free, unfettered, free market use of whatever talents we happen to possess. And
you're absolutely right. Yeah, that's right. This is the thing. There's a lot of people with talents out there. So I recently, about a year ago, I drew a comic book called Liberty Force. And it's about the characters from the Launchpad, the old TV show, or the old podcast that I did. And it was set in like this science fiction, television, Twilight Zone sci-fi thing, with libertarianism in it. And so I figured we need to hit, and I figured I could draw pretty well. So I figured we would do a comic book, and I think that was a great move on my part. I got a lot of sales from that. But that's another market that we're not exploring is the comics. The music. I mean, there's a up and coming amount of libertarian musicians who are out there, but I don't know if it's necessarily enough. And we have Eric July, but we need more musicians out there, and they're not. Where are they? I don't know. I don't know, Pat. I don't know.
Well,
I think. Go ahead.
I was going to say, despite my outward appearance as looking like the Family Guy, back when I was doing AM radio, where we could, I got you on that one, where we could literally do the 30-second clips.
Right.
My intro music was Public Enemy. Not Fight the Power, because everybody does Fight the Power, but Get Up, Stand Up. And my break music was a little family group called Anti-Flag.
Right. Oh yeah.
You can kill the protester, but you can kill the protests.
Right. That's right.
I look forward to YouTube and getting over their little licensing obstacles and hurdles, so that we can actually really introduce the wide world of whether it be thrash, punk, rockabilly, or anything back into the Liberty movement, because nothing screams liberty more than I think a thrash punk guitar break. I mean, that's you like.
Dude, yeah. Like, you know what, dude? I don't know. Have you heard Eric July?
Yeah.
Oh my God. I mean, that's not my style of music.
Right.
But man, that guy is cool. I mean, like, I've had him on my show, and he's just such a cool dude, and his music is just wonderful. And he really does spread the message of liberty. He was telling me stories about people, like, he was at a concert, and they'd be like, I really like that song you're talking about, the state and stuff. And he's just like, yeah, you want to know more? And he'll start talking to people, and people are interested in his lyrics, and they're kind of hidden. They're not up front in your, well, they kind of are to us. We know what the hell he's talking about. But most people, you know what I'm saying, though? Like, most people maybe don't know, like, exactly what he's referring to. So I think it's a great thing that he goes out there and he starts talking to people and like, hey, yeah, what's that song about? He's like, well, it's like this. This is what it's about. To me, that's awesome. I want that to happen for more musicians. I want to see libertarian musicians out there. And like, this is the reason why I started the Launchpad Media after the old podcast. What I wanted to do was start a media company that really didn't talk about libertarianism, but talked about liberty,
right,
in general. All right. And to bring about culture, because I think culture is the biggest thing that we're facing as libertarians is, like I was saying earlier, we have a problem being cool. I mean, there's some really cool guys, and there's a handful of really cool super dudes out there. But, man, I mean, some of the stuff, we're not going to get people by spouting or economic policies to them or ideas. People are not interested in this. We want to get them there. That should be the ends, but the means should be, let's make this fun. Let's write a comic book. Let's write a movie. Let's do something that's entertainment first, and then get the message out there through the entertainment. It doesn't even have to be the focal point of the movie. And I had a guest on the show, and he says, there's so many people who create Christian movies, and they're all horrible. They're terrible. And I name me a good Christian movie. No one can.
There's the one. Wait. There was the one where they all kind of disappeared on the plane flight. That was
left behind.
Yeah, but that was like the highlight of the movie was like when they all disappeared, and then after that, it was all just sort of a letdown. The planes crashed, people disappeared, and then people started emoting about it, and that's where you lost. Yeah. I wanted more people to disappear randomly. Mm-hmm. Listen, all the great political movements in history, particularly recently with the ability of radio and then the internet to disseminate them, have been based in part on using popular music, art, and culture. And again, I talk about groups like Public Enemy and NWA. Yeah. I mean, if it was both of those groups' music stands completely on its own. And the fact that there's a political content to it just made it resonate more with inner city youth than it might have otherwise. You look at reggae. All right, early reggae, particularly good. We go back to Peter Tosh, Jimmy Cliff, and Marley. All right, the Wailers. It was all politically, as our former President Bush would have said, orientated music. All right, where ultimately you had cultures go nuclear. All right, because of the delivery system. You go back as far as to a completely different extreme. The entire Methodist movement, the Quaker movement, the Shaker movement, all of those you use because. In that case, you were dealing with an underclass that didn't have the education, if you will, that the established ruling class had. They used music, art, and culture to disseminate a message. And so you're absolutely right. We need to find that voice within ourselves, all right, and actually move beyond the lectures. I'm not probably as guilty of that as anybody else standing here getting into inside. We all are. So I guess the call goes out now. All right, we've got about a year and a half till Austin. There is outside of Providence, of course, and Seattle, but Providence, of course, there are a few as cooler potentially cities in America, quirkier. Yes, there's a hipster element, but from what I understand, it's remarkably bro-free, so we're safe there. All right. So,
okay, but you're away from New Jersey, right?
Right. Hey, I grew up there, so. Hi, my name's Pat. I'm a neocon, and I was from New Jersey. Hi, Pat.
Oh, okay.
So the call goes out then. The call goes out by 2020. All right. We want to have some slamming after parties in a city that's geared up for after parties that are as good or better than the convention floor fights.
Right. No, I'm with you. I mean, like, that's the thing. I mean, there's a lot of. I was looking at a couple like campaigns, and one of the campaigns I found very unusual, and I don't know if it was in 2016, but I don't know. I'm kind of confused by it, Pat. I really don't know the John McAfee campaign. I think they were trying. Now, hear me out. Like, one of my best friends. He designed it with Judd Weiss. He designed the whole image for the whole John McAfee thing. But, dude, to this day, I still don't know what the hell was that about. Like, were you there in 2016?
Oh yeah. In fact, I had the unique pleasure of interviewing John McAfee on an AM/FM radio station, a Cumulus. I mean, we're talking corporate Radio America. As corporate as it gets, radio station on a Saturday night, and let's just say when I asked him about the decriminalization of sex work, and he went into his own, shall we say, provocative personal relationships and the stories that were endemic to that realm, if you will. I'm trying to be a little obtuse here, keeping a family.
Right.
All right. Yeah. On a live AM corporate radio. I mean, we're talking about conservative. Rush Limbaugh smoking, Percocet-driven radio station. All right.
Sure.
I mean, holy cow!
I know.
My producer in a show that was normally pretty low key. My producer hovered over the dump button the entire hour. Sort of like Mission Impossible, just waiting to drop his body on it. Yeah. So I the couple times I met the man. Listen. If you're older like I am, he evokes sort of that Hunter Thompson sort of electric Kool-Aid acid test, early Silicon Valley approach
mentality.
Yeah, and I bet that's probably the best way I could sum it up. But you're right. It was when he walked in with the stilt walkers in Orlando.
I was like, what am I watching here? I'm like, am I tripping? I don't even do drugs. But I'm like, did somebody slip something in my beer? Because I can't believe it. I don't know. I think he was doing something unique, though. And again, we're going to have a lot of people out there doing that. That's where I want to kind of bring it around, that we're going to have people on stilts. I mean, this is really what it boils down to. And I think it was good that he tried what he did. Like, I totally thought it was very artistic, but I think it was a little too artistic, if you know what I mean. Like,
it was like Peter Gabriel artistic. You were trying to figure out exactly.
Yes. It was definitely progressive rock, and I think people need to hear rock and roll first before they move to that genre. They move to that section.
Right.
So I don't know. I'm just saying, I just think that we need to kind of appeal to I think we what you were saying with like Public Enemy. I love that band or rap group. right? I mean, I had Fear of a Black Planet. I felt pretty cool having that record blasting very loud. And it was awesome. NWA was great. And I'm like the only white kid on my block listening to that in 1989.
Right.
You know, and I felt pretty cool then.
Right.
But I mean, but they made a dent. They told a story.
Right.
Their side of the story, whether it's true or not, doesn't matter. But they did make an impact in culture. And that is so important, and they did strike a root in that there is a unjustness, an unfairness to the black population. But what I feel they failed is they pointed their anger and aggression not towards necessarily the state, but more so towards the man. And I think that's where we need to kind of get our aggression and anger and our frustration and how much we passionately and despise the government and how we want to shift this blame to them and not the man and not a business because they want to make a dollar. I mean, everyone's a capitalist. Everyone wants to make a buck. That's what our messaging should be.
Right. I agree 100%. We've had our own sort of here in Rhode Island, we had a moment, if you will. We had a rather notorious. Our roots in Rhode Island start with a baseball player and a failed $120 million investment and an ultimate test. You know, really a great example of the failures of corporate cronyism up and down the line. And at first, our passion was against this guy Curt Schilling, who ironically was a former player in Arizona. And then we came to realize that it was the state. That the state, for its own purposes, sought to create this environment where they can co-opt freedoms of business, stunt the growth of small independent businesses from which freedom ultimately emanates, and use it for their own purposes. And so it's the state, the collective power of the state to suppress the individual and the rights of the individual. That is the demon that needs to be exercised in our country today. And the beauty of the message and the way that I see John and Kim already starting to develop it is it's just so it's rock and roll, but it's also so plain spoken. None of us are embarrassed anymore to be libertarians. F it.
No.
I mean,
no.
We believe what we're going to believe. We're not going to change it. We're not going to modify it. We're not going to water it down. We're not going to make it easier to consume.
No.
It's
so
just,
easy.
Yeah.
It's so easy. I mean, I always tell people, do you think, today I was talking to some guy, a coworker today, and he came to me, he's like, dude, you know what? I have to pay taxes, man, and I'm just trying to figure out every way I can to not pay taxes. I'm like, good for you. Have you heard of the libertarian movement? And all of a sudden I heard him say something. Us as libertarians, it's our job at that point to jump in and try to get him over to our side. And again, he hates the state. He hates, and here's the thing, the ultimate picture is everybody on this earth, any country, it doesn't matter. Everybody in this world, under any government, which there is all government, has been screwed by the state, one way or another. One way or another. And we need to tell people that they are not alone. And we need to fight this. We need to fight the tyranny. We need to fight the oppression. We need to fight the taxes. We need to fight the discrimination. We need to fight the legislation. All of this stuff needs to happen. And like I'm telling you, Pat, I am 100% behind Kim, and I think she is the best spokesperson for this position, for the role for president. But I mean, she is really awe-inspiring me. Like I sit and I have the honor of being next to her every day, and it's just like, wow. I'm like outside, we're smoking, or I'm smoking, and she's watching me smoke, and I'm like, hey babe, what do you think of this? And she's like, bam. She's amazing. And I mean, I feel like, man, she is just so honest and full of so much integrity. I am the world's luckiest man to be with her, for one. So I mean, if you're listening, babe, bam. All right, hopefully I get some tonight. Bam. All right, but anyway, so
well, there's a lot of misdirected. Here to me is the real tragedy of the Trump administration. We can look at all the foreign policy nightmares. We can look at tariffs. We can look at all the arcane aspects of government. But what the real tragedy to me is, you've got a seething anger in this nation against the state that he has co-opted to use its anger and develop a sense of hatred towards people on either side. And by the way, the Democrats are completely guilty of this. So instead of actually focusing this energy, trying to direct it in a positive nature to rekindle, if you will, reignite the liberty in this nation, instead what they do is they divide and rule by division, rule by hatred, ruled by being antagonists, provocateurs, with no real solution whatsoever. The notion in the year 2019 that we don't understand that the path to a virtuous, peaceful nation is through the free exchange of people, ideas, and commerce. That we can't, after all these shared experiences we've had, all right, and just in our generation, my generation in particular, that we can't accept that is a direct function of the state and the duopolies' attempts to pervert the power of the state in favor of division. And that's, to me, the biggest tragedy of all, because we've lost generations of talent to it. So when you talk about the cost of not having liberty, the creativity that could have stemmed by inner city youth having private access to education as opposed to a failed educational system.
Sure.
In a sense, willing them to a lifetime of diminished expectation and bigotry. The stunting of the American industrial machine because of corporate cronyism and now tariffs and the resulting loss to hardworking people who could have profited from a true free market economy. Those are things that we permanently lost because of the duopoly and because of the state. And we need to collectively, as a group, and this is the next issue, is walk away from our divisions and where we don't agree on, focus for the next year and a half on maximizing the message of liberty, and forget the other crap and leave it behind us.
Well, the thing is, Pat, like in the mornings I drive to work, and I've been listening to this. I put on talk radio. That's my thing. I love listening to radio. I've always loved radio since I was a kid. And there's this conservative blowhard named Hugh Hewitt. And I've been. Oh my God. I listen to him because I don't want to listen. I'd rather listen to a Republican than a Democrat. I'm going to be honest with you. But at the same time, I'm listening to his show, and everyone's just calling in going, I'm so excited about this wall. If you can't get behind Trump, you're stupid. And there was a woman who was killed by a drunk driver, and he was an illegal alien, and that's why we should have a wall. I'm thinking to myself, you guys are morons. You're full of fucking morons. Sorry my language, but you're fucking morons. And I'm like sitting here thinking to myself, I'm blown away by this, because the concept of they only give you two options. This is it. You have a wall or no open borders. Closed borders, open borders. That's it. Those are your choices. And there's a lot more options out there. There's market solutions to these problems, not the government. And so, again, I have to go back to this. And the problem with the right and the left is they want to grow the state. And that pisses me off, because everyone is fooled into thinking, well, we need the government to fix this. We need the government to fix this. The government should stay out of it. It's the root problems of the wall that have caused the immigration influx. It is not that people – why would people come here? Why would people just come over here from Mexico? We're not worried about Canada. I don't hear anyone wanting to build a wall up north. Doesn't happen. No one's talking about that. Those fucking Canadians are just as much of an assholes as the Mexicans, all right? So, what I'm saying is, what's the problem? Well, it's the illegal, it's the guns, it's the gun laws, it's the the healthcare, it's the welfare system. There's all these factors that we should be looking at, not spending more money, more tax money on a flipping wall. So this is the problem with the culture. People are driven by these blowhard Republicans, these Democrats, who are telling people, these are your two choices. That's it. This is all you got. And we're saying, look beyond this shit. Look, there's other solutions. Find it. This is up to you as an individual to find the solution. Right.
Yeah. Yes. 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 Yeah. Sure. Yeah. For sure. Yeah. Yeah. I'm with you. Yes. Well, you know what? But the thing is though, people are just, they're why people are afraid that they're coming in and taking jobs because they are. And they are. And I would too. Because one, they're here illegally, so there's no minimum wage. Employers can pay them whatever they want. So I would, as an employer, I'd be like, hell yeah, I don't have to pay Jim $15 an hour. I can give Jose 7. Cool. Great. And he's harder working than Chad, the white guy. Because Chad wants medical, wants this. Jose just wants work. So I give that. I think it's wonderful that he's out there and he's here to do something good. There's some problems. I mean, there's problems on both sides of this scenario. All I'm saying is the government needs to stay out of it. And we need markets to decide who comes and who stays, not the state. And I think this is a false dichotomy that Trump is putting up the wall. And to me, I think it's his Obamacare. The wall is his Obamacare, and this is why he's pushing it so hard. So he will be remembered from years to come as the guy who built a wall. And that's all I think he's doing it for, is for it's marketing for Trump. I don't know what you think, Pat. What do you think? Mm-hmm. 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 Sure. Uh, yeah. I'm not. Yeah. Right. Mm-hmm. Sure. Mm-hmm. 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 Sure. Yeah, I can see that. Mm-hmm. Sure. You know, right. Mm-hmm. No, I agree with you. I mean, it's a great thing to have different cultures come in. You can learn. I mean, it's very prosperous. You have more consumers. You have more people here wanting to buy things. No, I get that. I'm just saying that I think people are afraid because of the rhetoric the left and right have. You know what I'm saying? And yes, and they are dividing. And one of the other things, though, is, now we're talking about borders. I don't know how we got here, but here we are. In regards to that, I mean, we wouldn't have this problem if it was all privatized, Pat. I mean, if we had all privatized land, if you want to put a fence up, put one up. If you don't worry about it. Let them come through. Now, that could be a problem because if you were the only guy out of like 50 houses, it didn't have a fence, you get a lot of traffic. I was thinking about that the other day. But other than that, I mean, that's the real solution to the problem. And that way, no one's rights are being trampled. And if you do want to have somebody there who wants to let people through or have them on their property, by all means, that's awesome. That's up to them as a libertarian and respect their property rights. That's all I'm getting at. Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. 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 That is right. That's right. And no, you're right, man. That's beautiful. And that's the thing. What about eminent domain? How many homes are going to be taken because of this? How many acres of land are going to be, well, we're building a wall. We're going to have to take your property and we're going to give you fair market value for it. And then they just come up with some arbitrary number. And right. That's right. That's right. Okay. Right. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Like I was saying, man, Pat, I'm telling you, man, driving home, I just couldn't believe what I was hearing. Like at one time, I was a neocon. I'm sorry. We have that in common. But at the same time, I thought maybe I could listen to them a little bit, hate with less hatred than the left. Man, I was sitting there going, are you people stupid? And I guess once you become a libertarian, you understand the philosophy. You just realize that everyone's a moron. And especially these blowhard Rush Limbaugh or Rachel Maddow, whoever they are, Don Lemon, it doesn't matter. They're morons. They don't think outside the box, and they are told and they are fed what to say through like an IV. I don't know, whatever the media tells them. If this makes money, just keep saying what you're saying, Don Lemon, because people are buying it and our ratings are going high. Keep doing what you're doing. And like what we're doing, Pat, we're doing this because we love liberty. We're doing this just because the passion that we have to make a difference, to get out there, to talk to people, to make them understand where we're coming from. They may disagree, fine, but at least we plant that kernel or that nugget in their heads that maybe they can reference later on and be like, maybe those guys were right. You know what I mean? Like this is what we do, man. And it's great. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Right. Sure. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Evil government. That would make sense. Yeah. Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Right. Sure. Yeah. Yep. Right. Well, yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. No, and here's the thing. Like, people are talking about McDonald's, like how evil McDonald's is. I'm like, really? I mean, like, I go there on my own free will because why? I like it. All right. Like, I love McDonald's. I don't know if you could tell, Pat, but I put on a couple pounds because of McDonald's, right? But like, I'm telling you, man, I love Mickey D's. And I always talk about how much it's like my guilty pleasure. But then you have people complaining about it, like, oh, it's unhealthy. And, blah, blah. I'm like, well, guess what? They wouldn't be making money if people hated their food. And people are giving their money voluntarily, right? So I don't have a problem with that. What I do have a problem, though, with is when government picks the winners and losers. That's when it becomes gray. And that's where I have an issue. But then I had this thought the other day. I said, at what limit? I mean, at what is the cutoff point regarding a business? Because somebody always gets some sort of government something. I mean, I don't necessarily right now, but when people get their tax returns, right? Sometimes whatever they pay in, sometimes they get back more than what they paid in. So would that be welfare? And if a business does that, or if somebody or an organization does that, is that welfare? And are they owned by the government? So I don't. It's a blurry line, but there is. I mean, I don't know. What do you think? Mm-hmm. Yes, it is. It is. I hate that shit. I hate that stuff. It is. Sure. Yeah. I'm with you. I'm with you. Right. No, I'm with you. No, you're right. Yeah. Well, I think it's good to think about it because at one point, what caused my thought process on this was I was talking to a commie, and he was like, I don't know, he must have been. I don't know. I was in Seattle anyways. So I'm downtown Seattle, and I remember seeing this dude, a bartender, me and him were talking, and I said, you know what? If this business wants to be able to smoke in here, they should have the right to. And he's like, well, I don't think that's right, Johnny, because it's not good for their health. I'm like, oh, shut up. Oh my God. Okay, now you're a commie to me, right? And screw property rights, but excuse me. So we started talking, and he goes, you know what? Everybody has a little bit of stakehold in this business. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, well, like this business in itself is on the road. And I'm like, yeah, so? Well, who owns the roads? I'm like, oh God, here we go. The city? He goes, right. So the city is therefore all the tax dollars are going to the city. Now, would we have this business if we didn't have that road or the parking outside the road? And I'm like, shut up, dude. That is the biggest BS excuse for going against property rights. And this is how they think, though. I mean, you got to know your enemy, right? And the same thing with incrementalism or moderism or moderation or pragmatism, whatever they want to call themselves. The problem with it is they are diluting the message of liberty. Again, we can go back to the beginning of the show when we were talking about what is libertarianism and how do we sell it. We don't sell it by going, a little bit of taxation is okay. We don't sell it like that. We have to sell it. Taxation is theft. You own yourself. You are an individual. This is how we do it. We can't go, well, marijuana's okay, but all the other drugs, no. No, we need a libertarian candidate. It's like, legalize it all. Now, if you're stupid enough to do it all, that's on you, buddy. And you're responsible for your own actions. And the state, and nobody's going to take care of you unless you've got a really rich family. So other than that, that's on you, bud. But nobody looks at it like that. I don't understand. I think it might be the schooling. I don't know. Right. Mm-hmm. 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 Right. Sure. Sure. That's right. That's right. That's right. Very easy. I mean, like, you're right. Like, I am not, again, I enjoy, women are beautiful. Prostitution. I've never gotten a prostitute. But guess what? If people want to have one, they should have the right, and that prostitute should not go to jail for having a transaction between two consenting adults. I am not necessarily going to advertise it. All right. I don't think it's necessarily a moral thing, but it's up to the individual to decide whether or not they want to do that. I for one, don't do drugs. Well, I do. I drink and I smoke. I do drugs, but legal, well, quote unquote, legal ones. But the thing is, I won't do like crack cocaine, meth, or any of that other stuff because I just don't want to do it. And it's up to me to make that decision for myself. And I think that's how we view things. You're absolutely right. I don't, again, with gay marriage, it's none of my business what you do. I don't care. I personally wouldn't do it, but that's up to you. And I think that's what we need to be selling people. It doesn't matter what you like. You need to give people the freedom and liberty to do what they want. And that's the message we should be selling. Yes. I agree. And I think you're right, Pat. I mean, we do need to sell it hard. And we can't, again, we're never going to win any battles soft selling the message. Like, that's what I'm getting so tired of all these candidates who are like, well, like the Gary Johnson, I like Gary back in 2012. I was a brand new libertarian. I didn't know shit or stuff. And I saw Gary Johnson, and he was great. I thought he was like really cool. But then I heard Ron Paul, and I'm like, whoa, this guy is the cat's meow. Why? He didn't soft serve anything. He was honest, truthful, and he stuck to his guns as best as he could. He voted no on everything, and that's why I love that man, because he was foundationally principled at his core. We need more people like that. We need more people. We have none of this. We have very few in the Libertarian Party, and a lot of them dance around the issues. They dance. They're really good at dancing, but they don't stick to their guns on issues. And that's my gig, man. That's what I'm saying. Exactly. Yes. Yes. I agree, man. It's awesome. Yes. Right. Yeah. Right. Sure. I hear you. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. You must be talking about Bill Weld. You know what, though? I mean, I don't know. I like looking back. I mean, I don't know. I was confused when I first joined the party because I thought everyone shared the same belief system I did, like private property rights, stuff like that. And then we had, and then in 2012, Gary Bake the Cake Johnson started talking that nonsense. It's been really hard to find a good candidate. And, I don't know. I really feel like we've been kind of, I don't know. It's just like we need to win. We need to win. We don't really worry about the messaging, but we just need to win. And if you talk bad about another libertarian, you're an asshole. Or you're a jerk. Yeah, I got to censor myself. I don't know if this is a PG show, but I've already failed you already, Pat. So never mind. So I'm just going to keep going with it. But that's the thing, man. It frustrates me to death because all these people, we had a candidate here in Washington when I lived there before moving here to Arizona. We had a candidate, Matt Dubin, who was speaking about he was about some limited amount of gun control. And he's a libertarian. I'm like, what? What? He's like, well, I would support it. I would support this because of this, because that's reasonable. I'm for reasonable gun control. And then he tried to retract the statement, and then he said he was for it. And I'm like, I'm not supporting this guy. And I made a big public mess over this. And long story short, everyone in the party, a lot of the people in the higher end of the party were like, Johnny, what are you doing? What are you doing? Why are you talking this? Why are you putting our man down? I'm like, he's not a libertarian. He's talking about taking rights away, negative rights, as a matter of fact, from the individual. How can I sleep at night with my name associated with this individual? This is where we need to make a hard line, or draw a hard line in the sand, saying we are not going to cross this line, and this is what we need to do. If somebody says I'm for socialism, that's where I have an issue. There is no place in my realm, my world. If you're a socialist, you need to step out. I'm sorry, but like they're collectivists. Here's the thing. I had this discussion with Kim because she was like, well, they can live in communes and do whatever they want to do. And she's very smart. And she said it nicely. And I'm like, cool. But I'm like, but they could do that now. They could do that now. You could have a commune and you could take money from people and you could do that. We can't do what we want now. They can do what they want, but we can't. That's the difference. She's like, bam. I'm not. I'm just saying in our goals. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's a natural right. Yeah. Exactly. Mm-hmm. That's right. I agree. Yeah. Right. Makes sense. Does. That's right. It's so simple. You're right. And like I always tell people, I said, you should be able to, Pat, you should be able to own anything the U.S. government has. You should. You have every right. But do you have the right to use it? No. And so that's what I'm talking about, negative liberties. And these are very important to us. And I think that we should be fighting for freeing guns to or we should be expanding it. We should be like, you should be able to buy a missile and a grenade if you want. Fine, buy them if you can afford it. If you can afford it. And if you. Very cool. Very cool. That's right. Yeah. Very, very well put. Mm-hmm. Right. Right. Totally. Yeah. I'm with you. I'm with you. I'm with you, Pat. You know what's sad is one of my great friends said he went to his medical examination in Seattle. And he called me up and he's like, dude, you will not believe this. This has got to be on your show. I'm like, what happened? He goes, I was getting my checkup, and the doctor asked me if I owned a firearm. And of course I do, but we said no. And he's like, well, just to let you know, they're very hazardous to your health. And I'm like, this is how bad it's getting, where they're bringing the medical, they're bringing doctors in to spy on you and whether or not you have firearms. This is sad. This is sad. And what point? Sure. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Right. Sure. Yes. Right. No. But it's a no-brainer to us because we're libertarians. We know this, Right. Sure. Sure. Yep. I see where you're going. Right. Right. Exactly. Yeah. That's right. I'm with you. Absolutely. And you know what, Pat? I think I found what your star topic is. I think you love talking about guns. Never tell anyone that, Pat. Never tell anyone you don't own a gun. I got a small arsenal behind this curtain here. I'm kidding, but sort of. Right. But that's beautiful and that's awesome. And I do the same for you. This is what makes us libertarians. Hmm. Oh, yeah. Yes. You know what, Pat? It's all about unfettered liberty, man. And selling the message, being pure, not soft selling it, selling the message. Be honest. be honest with what we're doing, why we want it. We're about the individual. We're about property rights. We're about the non-aggression principle. We don't hurt people. We don't want to take their stuff. And it's about a voluntary society that we want to build. That's my point. To me, that's very simple, and it's very easy. It's not complicated. We're not talking about all these laws and legislation. We're talking about owning yourself and doing the right thing. And I think that's the most important thing, man. All right. So if you want to hear my show, it's called Blast Off with Johnny Rocket and Raylene Lightheart. You can find it at blastoffshow.com. Again, that's blastoffshow.com. And our mothership is the Launchpad Media. It's make sure you put launchpadmedia.com. And we have 6 shows on our network as of right now. So we have 6 podcasts. They're great. They're doing really wonderful. We have The Law with DK Williams. We have Postcards from Somalia, Sherry Voluntary. And we have, Sounds Like Liberty with Nick Picone and Lizzie. And Remzo, and I'm sorry, not Remzo. Alex Merced is doing, I just had an interview with Remzo. Alex Merced's doing his thing. Nice Guys Finish Free. And what was that show? We have a whole bunch of shows and articles and everything. It's great. It's awesome. So please check out the launchpadmedia.com. And guys, Pat, thank you so much for having me on your show, man. This is awesome. That's true. Thank you. Thank you. You know what? Yeah. I was just going to say, man, if I go to Rhode Island, we're going out and drinking and hanging out in the bar and maybe converting some libertarians. How's that? All right, man. Hey,